Hello, I'm Tom Dignan, and this is TalkNado. Today, on the show, we're going to be diving into the wonders and the magic of the deep web or the dark web. So today, joining me, I have from Triton College, Valse Carlotta, as well as RB senior John Fritsch, who are going to talk to us a little bit about the deep web. Later on, we're going to have sophomore Stephane Weston join us. We're going to hit a lot of topics. So let's get started. Val, you are the Information Technology Program Director at Triton College. Can you explain to us what that encompasses?
So basically, I create the curriculum for all of the computing programs at Triton. So recently, I developed cybersecurity, information assurance degrees, and certificates, mobile web, software development. So basically, I write all the curriculum for all the computing courses, and I actually measure it against some national standards in the cybersecurity and software development area as well. So we kind of get involved in government in terms of their standards for security education, and I make sure I write really good progressive security curriculum.
Good. How many students do you have in that program? Is it a big program?
We have about 2,000 students across the Computer Information Systems program, and the cybersecurity degrees are relatively new, so we have maybe 100 to 150 students in that kind of career or degree track right now.
It's great, great. We're going to start talking first of all about the general internet itself, what we know of, and basically the internet we all know and use is about 1%, I read, of what the actual internet is. Do you want to start with a little bit of general information on the IP addresses, HTTP? Give us some of that, and then we'll go to John also.
Yeah, the internet, as most people use it, we use a networking protocol called HTTP. That stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. The hypertext is important. That means the links that are found on each web pages, that's considered hypertext. It's a protocol which is also a standard, so it basically is the rules by which we write how things work on the internet. So browser manufacturers, ISPs, routers, networking equipment, we all have to implement the HTTP protocol in a technical way in order to make devices or software that runs on the internet. And then the way we manage connections to the internet is another networking protocol called TCP/IP, and that kind of handles connecting to the internet and then using HTTP for information sharing. So we kind of use the analogy of house addresses. Mm-hmm. So when you signed up to get your internet from Comcast or Xfinity, whatever you want to call it, or whatever your internet service provider is, they give you an address, similar to when you buy a home or rent an apartment, you get an address. And that address is how you're identified on the internet and how you use the technical protocols to connect to the internet. So when you kind of open a web browser and go surfing on the internet, you are using these networking protocols and using these standards for connection and using this kind of fingerprint identity called an IP address to say that your computer is unique. All IP addresses need to be unique on the internet, and that's how you connect to other machines or other servers on the internet.
So it's sort of, I'm here, it's me, and here's what I'm doing. So John,
yes.
Tell us what you do with the internet, with your 1%.
Not that much, really, considering how much more there is.
Okay.
The 1% is, just your everyday stuff, YouTube, Facebook, all the usual websites. The 99% encompasses a lot of the underlying stuff that we can't touch, like banking transactions, automated stuff that's not using what we use. HTTP.
So would you say that you don't use any of the 1%? Do you just bypass Google and Bing and all that good stuff? You don't even bother with it?
Well, no.
There's a straightforward answer. Now, what about this 1%? I mean, it seems like everybody talks about how vast everything is that we do with the internet, and yet what we see and what we use is just this unbelievably small portion. Why are we only getting that little bit?
Well, basically, we've kind of introduced the internet to the public through search engines. So Google, being the largest search engine, they actually make little pieces of software called bots or crawlers or web bots that crawl around the internet, and they actually use those links, the HTTP links, to go from one place to another and then index all of the content on every link they go to, right? So that's how they discover web pages or resources that are mostly using the HTTP protocol on the internet. So when we kind of think of using the internet, we immediately open Google and type something. So our access to what we think of as the internet is kind of limited by our usage of Google as our point of entry into the internet.
And so basically, am I not able to email you, John Fritsch? Is that what you're telling me?
You can do that.
I can't find you on Facebook. I can do that. Yeah. So, you know, assuming we get this 1%, we're going to take it to the next step after a quick break, and we're going to start to talk about what the deep web is. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to TalkNado. I'm Tom Dignan. I'm joined by Valse Carlotta, and we have Stephane Weston with us here. So now we're going to dive into the actual deep web or the dark web, which everything I look at when I look at the 1% just looks at it as this sinister portal of crazy things. So what is the real deep web?
You should probably distinguish between deep web and dark web.
Okay.
So deep web is actually not, shouldn't be confused with the dark web. The deep web is just things that are not indexed by search engines. So this could include academic publishing databases, scientific data like NASA data or NOAA data, just anything that search engines don't pick up and then show you in like a Google search result. So that's the deep web. It's just basically unindexed content. And then there's the dark web, which is specifically a network that uses a different piece of software called Tor and a different means of connecting, and it's all encrypted. So when we think about deep web versus dark web, most people associate the whole concept with the dark web, which is the whole, you know, encrypted criminal content, Silk Road stuff.
And Stephane, what do you do with the deep web? Hopefully you're in the deep web and not the dark web.
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of both. I mean, they're not all horrible places. I mean, like going on Tor, looking for like certain things. I mean, like some things are like good tutorials on like good computer tutorials that you're not normally going to find like on the like general internet itself. And then, you know, there's normally like the bad stuff, the illegal stuff, which I stay away from, you know. And, you know, it's one of those things where everybody says it's 1%. It's not necessarily 1% of all. I mean, it's probably close to it. But I mean, you think of it as like an ocean. You see the top of the ocean, but then there's all this stuff underneath that you don't see going on in like the backgrounds and whatnot.
Good. I'm just going to advise you to stay away from the dark web as a teacher here. I'll just, you know, I'm looking out for your best interest. Okay, so I've decided now that I want to get into the deep web, and I want to start surfing the rest of the bottom of the ocean. What do I need to do to actually plunge?
Well, you can try and find where, if you're looking for academic publications or scientific data, you can actually find more the URLs where that stuff is stored, or ways to access that through those associations or those institutions. So things like legal databases, right? You're going to go through kind of a gateway provider for those services like LexisNexis or something in order to access that deeper content. So it's going to be, you have to put more effort in beyond just a Google search, right? You have to look at you know, search engines that index just those types of data and kind of go hunting in your particular field of interest for those. And then the deep web, the dark web, is a totally different story. You have to use a piece of software called Tor and do a bunch of other stuff to get on that network. Once you're even using Tor, you can use Tor just to browse the internet. I mean, I've definitely used Tor just to provide anonymity online. That's the the real reason Tor exists is to provide us with an anonymous way to surf online. Honestly, everything you do on the internet is tracked if you're just opening a web browser and you connect to your ISP and start surfing the internet. All of that is tracked. Everything you do can be led back to who you are, and mostly your address, your house address, right, or your computer itself. So if you're looking for just anonymity in web browsing, then Tor is a good option. And then there's a whole network of sites that are run on the Tor network, and that's where it starts getting into, this might be a shady site, or this might be, you know, like he was saying, perfectly legitimate content, but people just don't want to be tracked and be totally identified all the time by the NSA or the FBI.
Okay, so this obviously sounds like I'm not going to sit down at my Mac with, you know, GarageBand in it and start getting into the deep web. What type of system do you have? Do you have this elaborate system of computer networking and ports everywhere?
Well, I mean, I do know some people who are, you know, they're really paranoid. You know, they've got like a VPN on, a virtual private network, where you're connecting to a different server using that as your IP address, you know. And then, you know, at the same time, they could be using Tor just because, you know, they don't want to be watched by the government. Unlike me, where, you know, I just use the general internet, you know. I have a VPN on, you know, I have ad block on. I blocked all, you know, most of the tracking devices that they have on there, which is pretty easy to do. But, you know, generally I just use the internet for YouTube and looking up homework and all whatnot and that, so.
So basically, you know, is this something that if I wanted to start this up, how much money am I going to have to invest to say I'm going to be a deep web person?
Zero.
$0.
Yeah,
so I
zero.
should be doing this now because it's
No.
just...
No.
We're going to get the answers to why I shouldn't be doing these things. Maybe it's because I don't know enough. Maybe it's because there's some deeper, darker secret in the deep web that we're about to find out. But we will be back in just a few minutes. Any last thoughts as we wrap things up about how you get yourself started with the deep web?
It's actually, the accessibility is very high at this moment in time. It used to be a little bit lower, but it's really high. And because of that, that's why people get into trouble.
Okay. We'll be back shortly. Don't go away. And we're back. This is TalkNado. I'm Tom Dignan, here with Valse Carlotta from Triton College, and now again, John Fritz. Okay, so we left off this last segment with me saying that I'm now prepared to delve into the deep web, and we had this adamant no. So let's talk about, first of all, why I should not just decide someday that I want to be a deep web surfer.
I think it is more important that you would know another deep web surfer or dark web surfer before you try to engage in it. Unfortunately, at this point in time, maybe this wasn't so a couple years ago, but the FBI and the NSA have started really attacking the dark web. And it might be very easy for you to get caught in what they would call a honeypot or a honey trap, where the FBI, the NSA, you know, kind of lures you to a place, to a site, and then injects some malware onto your computer or tries to harm your computer in some other way. And you were just kind of an innocent bystander because you were curious to that. So, you know, there was a point in time where it was pretty innocuous to go check it out. I think a lot of stuff on it is fake. It's kind of been sensationalized by the media, so there's a lot of fake sites, and a lot of people clone sites in order to obfuscate what sites are real and which ones aren't. So it's basically a giant place that you can't trust anything or anyone, and you definitely should never download a file from. So you're kind of walking into, you don't know, and because you don't know, the liability for you is high. So it might be something you would want to, work with someone who knows what they're doing, hang out with someone who knows what they're doing before you would just kind of venture into experimenting with this on your own.
Okay, so that being said, John, first of all, how did you get started in this? And then second, how do you know when you've dove too far?
Well, I definitely did my research first. Like, I looked at like Wikipedia and other sites to see what sites you actually can go to, what's safe to go to, because in a lot of cases, for example, I think the Twitter on the dark web is actually highly illegal content that you would not want to go to because of, you know, legal risks and stuff, for example.
Which would probably be one of the first sites that people would want to go see is what does Twitter look like on the other side, and it's full of bad things.
Yes.
So how did you get started? How long have you been looking at the deep web?
Only a few months, really. Not that long. But I mean, like, you find sites like a Russian mafia, you can buy drugs from the Russian mafia, apparently. And again, going off what Valse said, you really can't tell if it's real or not.
I'm just going to go ahead and say John is not working with the Russian mafia, hopefully, right? I think that's safe to assume, so let's avoid those sites. Now,
yes.
You talked about the FBI wanted to download and put malware on things on my computer because I was on these sites. What is my legal right when I go into the deep web because I'm using my servers or whatever the initials you were that I have this? So where can I say this is my stuff and it belongs to me?
You can't, because we've created a playing ground full of anonymity, right? No one knows who they are, and no one can trace you. So you don't know who's the NSA, who's the FBI, who's the Russian mafia, and who's more people like you who are just checking stuff out. So a lot of times you can't get into things anyway unless you're invited by someone, you're given some secret access to something. You have to send your all your identifying information to places before you're allowed access anyway. So it's kind of like scary surfing. You know, and then a lot of people just kind of hit, oh, maybe they can download an illegal movie or some music, but that's where you would probably get into even more trouble, because now you've invited some file from an unknown source onto your computer. So at worst, you're going to break some DRM laws by trying to download some, you know, illegal movie or something. But at worst, you might get ripped off. You know, say you do want to buy something and you think that would be cool. 9 times out of 10, someone's going to take your money and you will see nothing in return for that. So because there's no way of knowing who's who or verifying identity, you have no protection. You have no legal status different from anyone else. So it levels the playing field. The NSA, the FBI, and you are all the same people.
So as we dig deeper into the deep web, this sounds like a hornet's nest to me. So why, in the name of everything, would you want to start doing this, John? What's the purpose of it?
It's definitely a great internet security sort of thing. Like, you can delve into how this works and learn about it through experiencing it. Like how anonymous it is, how there's no way of tracking anyone. You can really just get a feel for that, how anyone can say anything they want to, they can post anything they want to, and there's no risk of any sort of consequence of that.
It sounds scary to me. So as we end this segment, what's the unscary? What's the safe part about this? What's the reason why I would want to do this? Real quick before we wrap this segment up.
It's very important to note that the technology itself and the reason for encrypting everything you're doing and obfuscating your identity is not scary. That should be something that we embrace in terms of legal free expression on a network, and that we've tried to preserve on the clear web but have not done such a good job. So it's not, the technology itself is not scary, it's just how people use it.
Okay. We will be back in a few moments, and we're going to talk about this, the responsibility we have here in the deep web. I'm Tom Dignan. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to TalkNado. I'm Tom Dignan. We're here talking about the deep web with Valse Carlotta, and now we have Stephane Weston back. Okay, so we left off talking about, the deep web and even the dark web a little bit about, how you regulate this and what is fair and the freedom of information. And what's your stance on this whole thing? Can or should the deep web be regulated?
No. I think the way the internet was set up, the technology behind the way the protocols and the standards were created were about kind of ultimate accessibility and, you know, a level playing field for anyone to put whatever they want on their computers and on these networks and on servers. And then we see the ability to do that being eroded through legislation, as well as through being tracked. Every time you go to a site, you know, something's being put on your computer to track you further. You know, what you're doing is being sent back to 500 different services. So, you know, the regulation opportunities on the clear web, on the clear internet are kind of being, you know, Patriot Act, being taken away from us. So in response to that, the Tor network was created. You know, people, maybe you're in a hostile country and you need a way to access the rest of the world, and your government has blocked the internet, the regular clear internet. The Tor network would be something you can turn to put video out or put stories out. Journalists use it a lot. That's where all the Snowden leaks kind of were exchanged, all those files were exchanged. Even things like the recent Panama Papers, right? So a lot of governments and journalists will use this network to protect their anonymity, and technology is just what it is. I think it's a you know, technological marvel in terms of its infrastructure and how they've built it out, and how anyone can be a node in this network, and we can kind of have this other internet. And there's really no precedent for regulating it, and the whole reason it was incepted was to fight against other kind of you know, factors that made the clear web kind of you know, privacy you know, gone. You know, we just don't have anymore. So you know, there's really no reason to regulate it. If the law enforcement agencies want to go after people doing bad things, they'll go after people doing bad things. They don't really care where or how, right? So, you know, it's just kind of subject to the same, you know, law enforcement agencies trying to find people doing illegal things as regular life, right? So that's kind of.
Stephane, your thoughts? Regulation? No regulation?
Well, I mean, I say to an extent. I mean, there's things that are like obviously illegal, like let's say buying drugs, which I mean, you know, I mean, is that really necessary to be on the internet? You know, that's, you know, up for debate. But I mean, like other things, you know, like news articles, like all that fun stuff, you know, that's totally should be fine on there. But people are just being shut down because they, you know, the government doesn't like what they're saying, you know, and it's like, well, I can, you know, I can put this on here. I'm totally able to, and the government says we don't like it, so we're not going to put it on there for you. And that's, you know, that's where it kind of gets to a debate, because ClearNet internet is the same way, but, you know, people go to the dark web to be able to say what they want, and as the time goes on, you know, the government's saying, well, you're not going to be able to do that so much anymore.
It seems like the farther we get and the more the technology develops, the lines get blurred over what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, and it seems like it then becomes this all or nothing. Either we can post everything or we can't post anything. So is there a happy medium? Is there a middle ground that we can meet where we make the tech people happy, but we keep national security interests happy as well?
No, I think there's a very classic argument in this space that's, if I'm not doing anything wrong, why should I care? Right? That's kind of, you know, goes around a lot in the hacker communities. And if you actually talk to a bunch of lawyers about that argument, is that a valid argument? If I'm not doing anything wrong, why should I care that I'm being tracked, or I have no privacy, or, you know, everyone knows who I am, everyone could get my credit card number if they wanted to. It's kind of a slippery slope, right? You're basically saying that you trust government, and that if you bought a bag of fertilizer online and then there was a SWAT team at your door, then that's perfectly okay. And that's kind of the issue, is that at any point in time, government can create rules or laws that can be held against you, held against your past behavior. So if your emails are being stored for up to a year with your email service provider, all of a sudden everything you put into email could be used against you for whatever law was created. So the whole if you're not doing anything wrong, it's okay, kind of doesn't hold its weight in this community.
Stephane, the same idea. If you're not doing anything wrong on the deep web, so why are you worried about regulation?
Well, it's one of those things where it's like, as she was saying, the government can make up new laws as it wants, and it's the internet. You know, the internet's like a big bowl of like soup and whatnot. You don't know what's in there, you know, and sometimes like the government might not, well, I don't know how to phrase this, but like, you know, as she was saying, like, I don't really know how to put it. But yeah, like some things, like as she said, if you're buying a bag of fertilizer and you do get swatted, you know, it's one of those things where the government can do what they want on the dark web, and actually most of the sites on there are regulated by the government to bait people who are, you know, hacking and stealing and doing illegal things, you know, and that's how they try to catch people. But the way Tor is set up, it's extremely hard to do that because it's like you bouncing a ball across the room because here's your IP, but then and then a second later it's someone else's IP, and then it's someone else's, and then it's someone else's, and they really can't track that. But I mean, then there's an exit node where it is eventually ends up being one of like, I think there's like 1,000 or something like that in exit nodes in the world. And you know, that's where the government can say, well, you are doing something illegal, this is illegal, and you know, that's where they can kick in your door and then you go to jail.
If we all used it though, they wouldn't be able to find any of us. It would just be a huge level of obfuscation that they would not be able to handle.
A very large bowl of soup.
Right, yes.
Okay, well, this has been TalkNado. I'm Tom Dignan. We were here with special guest Valse Carlotta from Triton. Stephane Weston, thank you to John Fritsch. And please tune in next week as we talk about more interesting TalkNado-ish things.